right, it's an honor to be here with you today. Some of you I know really well because I see you on the weekend. Some of you, it's maybe your first time here or you just attend lunch with a leader. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here today. I grew up in the Atlanta area and I worked with middle school and high school students for a decade and then moved out here to lead a church from the Atlanta area here in 2007. So almost 16 years. And I really appreciate the privilege of speaking. Typically, we have someone in the marketplace, someone in a business leadership role to come and speak. But it's an honor to be here today speaking because leadership is leadership. We're moving people from one place to another. We're caring about them and helping them move to the next place, accomplish a mission together. And in my world, just a little peek behind the curtain for those who might not know what church leadership is like, is that we gather people around an idea and a mission, something we're trying to accomplish together, and we move people along through a spiritual journey, but a personal growth journey as well. And so when you have thousands of people who gather together, we have lots of volunteers, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, and so we empower them, encourage them, enable them to help us accomplish the task together. And so that's challenging. Also here at our church, we have 20 plus people who are employees. Our annual budget is a little over $4 million a year. We have millions of dollars in assets. And so I have a spiritual side, creative side to my leadership role, but there's also a business executive type leadership role that we have as well. So if you think about a small business in our community that would have those kinds of things, those are things that you're managing. And so we're constantly thinking about how can we grow as a church? And you're probably thinking about that too. How can you grow your business, your organization, your marketplace ministry? How can you help people move along? And so if you're taking notes today, I want you to write down a couple of things. And I just want to give you some real practical, helpful things, I think. One, if you want to grow your organization, you grow your people. If you want to grow your organization, you want to grow your business, you grow your people. We're only going to ever go as far as the people we surround ourselves with. So our sales associates, the people who work in our office, the people who are executives who help us enlarge the organization. If we want to grow that, we have to grow those people. And if you want to grow people, the only way to do that is to grow yourself. Because people follow growing leaders. And so if we're constantly thinking about how do we grow people, if I turn that perspective back toward myself and I think, okay, how do I grow myself? How do I help myself take those? I don't know about you, the hardest person for me to lead in the world is the one that stares back at me in the mirror. Like it's easy for me to look at other people and go, yeah, you should do this or do that. I can see the path, but leading myself is the hardest person that I ever have to lead. So I want to talk about as we come to the end of the year, this will be a brief message, but hopefully very practical and helpful. I don't know if you're like me, I begin to think about what the next year is going to look like about the end of November and into December. I'm a planner, I'm a goal setter, but I want us to slow down for just a moment as we we're in the last quarter, but now we're into that last couple of weeks of the year. And here's the idea is that one of the primary jobs of a leader is to think. When we think about leadership, we think about action, we think about accomplishing things, we think about checking off the to-do list, but one of the primary jobs as a leader, if you oversee anybody, is to think about where we're going, to think about what kinds of things and are we going to anticipate for the next year. And this is so vital because we're so busy, and I know you know this, but vision leaks. That if we have a vision or a perspective about what we want our life to be like and what we want our corporation or organization, what we're trying to accomplish together, that vision leaks because we get so busy and people lose sight of what we're trying to accomplish together. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. We're going to walk through just a little exercise today, and then I'm going to hand it off to you for the end of the year. But In my world, December is a very busy month, and probably is for you too because you're closing out the calendar year. But in my world, this is one of the busiest months of the year. This weekend, our church will have the Christmas store, which is a huge endeavor to give back to our community. We'll serve over 1,000 children. And then we'll go into our Christmas services, and at our church we'll have 9 Christmas services, some here at this location, some at another location. They're all identical, but we're trying to service a lot of people in a small building. And so once I get finished with that, my family and I, we have a little tradition. We will go out and eat after on Christmas Eve night. We used to go to Japanese, now we go to Maggiano's, and we'll eat, and then I go into a coma for a couple of days because I'm tired. But then I love the last week of the year because not only is it kind of a downtime, it also helps me to get set and ready for the next year. So that's what I want to lead us into today. Is that if you're going to have the best year ever next year, 2023, you're going to need some preparation time. You're going to need some time to think. And so whatever stage you're in at life, whatever endeavor you're trying to accomplish, whatever business you're trying to lead, your think time is vital and important. And some people are naturally like this. You lean into that, and you're more of an introvert, maybe like me, and you think and you're quiet and you read. Other people, it's a discipline for you to slow down and do that. But I want to encourage you on that last week of the year to carve out some hours to think about your life and about the next year. And if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. A change of pace and a change of space equals a change in perspective. So here's what that might look like practically for you, is that, hey, it's the last week of the year. Most of us are wrapping things up. You may be in the office, you may not be, but somewhere you wouldn't ordinarily be. Maybe it's just a coffee shop downtown. Maybe it's getting away to a cabin. A change of pace, slowing down, and a new space oftentimes for me equals a change in perspective. I'm just not in the same routine. So I encourage you to do that. Here's another practical thing I would encourage you to do as you begin to think about the end of this year and going into next year is to think on paper. This is so important, is to take the ideas and the things I've learned this year, the things that I'm looking out toward in the future, and to write those things down. Now, this is funny because I talk to a lot of guys about journaling. I think journaling is important. And I think writing our thoughts down on paper, it matters. It helps us to build a category of how we're thinking. Now, some people don't do this because they're afraid that somebody will grab them and read what they wrote. Like somebody's going to read your diary, and you feel this pressure to write all the right things. No, this is just that brainstorming session of getting all of the jumble out of my head and onto paper. I think this is really, really important. I don't know about you. I get really, really busy, and sometimes things get foggy. There's clutter in my thinking. I'm worried. I'm overwhelmed. How is this going to happen? What's going to happen with this employee? How are we going to help them grow to where they need to be? And getting those thoughts out of my head and onto paper helped me to just move the pieces around on the chessboard. So I've said enough about that, but grab a notebook and write some things down. I think it's better to write them handwritten than on a computer. Like you could take pictures of it, type it in later, but this free flow thought of, hey, what is everything that's on my mind? So now I want to lead us into a time, and maybe this might jog some things for you, but I've given you all the questions that are on the back side of the note-taking outline there. You can take these home with you, but I just want to highlight a couple of these things. They might jog your time. Like if you've never done this before or this is a new practice for you, hopefully these will be some stepping stones as you begin to contemplate what happened over the last year. Here's how I like to go about it. Begin with the personal questions. Just to sit down, for me, I pray, I say, God, I need your wisdom and direction about last year and for coming up in the next year. And then I just start to ask myself some questions in some of the key categories or domains of my life. How am I doing in my faith? That's really important to me. Like, what did that look like? How did I grow? How did I take steps this year? How's my marriage? And hey, by the way, not just thinking about, hey, how do I think my marriage is? How about asking my spouse? She might have a different opinion about how things are going. How are things going with my kids, my family? Just thinking through each of those people who are involved in the inner circle of my life, my schedule, my digital life. Like how am I doing online? Am I wasting too much time scrolling? How am I using that time? Serving, am I giving back to my community, my finances, my social life, my thought life, my creative life, my hobbies, physically? Like just looking through. And here's a good practice is many people go back and look over their calendars of the last year, like, hey, what did I do? What were we involved in? And what kind of things did we try to accomplish? But here's a new thing I've been trying over the last year or so is I go back to the first photo that I took, because we all keep a record of our year in photos, right? So you go back to the first photo in January and just scroll through your own personal photo library. What happened with your kids? What happened at work? What kind of things and it just jogs your memory to begin to think about. And this is important. I was with a group of guys last Saturday and we were talking about this. If you're a leader, you're a hard charger and you're almost always exclusively focused on the future. I mean, most of us in this room would just rather rip the rear view mirror off of our car because we want to look out the windshield. Like that's how we think about life. But there's something about celebrating. There's something about looking back. There's something about reflection. In fact, on your notes, I forgot to read it, but I think it's just an incredibly important quote. Experience is not the best teacher. If that were true, everyone with experience would be better, and they're not. Evaluated experience is what makes us better. So looking back over the year and going, okay, where am I in these areas? And then I think this is really, really important. What kind of person do I want to become? Almost always, if you're a leader like me, I jump to what do I want to do this next year? But I think it's important to slow down, put it in neutral for a moment and go, okay, what kind of person do I want to become? Like what kind of friend do I want to be? What kind of husband do I want to be? What kind of leader, manager do I want to be? And start to begin to describe some of those things. What does that look like? Then I ask myself the questions like, what do I love doing? What am I passionate about in my life? And then opposite, what drains me? What are the things that are just, man, they're so exhausting? And odds are, many times there's somebody in my organization who loves doing that and I could hand it off to them and delegate. I've got to come to the place where I trust them enough. What's draining me? What habits do I need to start? What habits do I need to stop? What was my original calling from God? And if you're not a Christian person or if spirituality is not like top on your list, you might phrase it in a different way. This is how I phrase it. Like, what's my original calling from God? Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And I go back to a couple of key things for myself. And how has that changed over the year? Now, I started doing this a couple of years ago, and I just, again, with pen and paper, I know this is very granular, but I think it also is helpful and practical, is that I imagine what my life would look like 5 years from now. And here's what I do in the most simple way. I write my name, my wife's name, my son's name, my daughter's name, my daughter-in-law's name, my granddaughter's name, and then I write what age they will be in 5 years. What age I will be, and that's scary. Whew. And what age we will be. And then I just begin to think about what is life going to look like in 5 years. And depending upon your season of life, you understand that a lot happens in 5 years. A lot happens in 5 years. 5 years ago, my kids were, one was in high school, one was just about to go to college, and now my entire family framework is completely different. We moved into this building a little over 5 years ago, and my life has radically changed. Yours does too, over a 5-year period of time. So that helps me think about, okay, what's happening in the next season? Because we underestimate what we can do in a year, and we overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 5. So a 5-year period is a long time. And then this is what really stretches us, is to begin to think about what does life look like 30 years from now? I mean, that's a chunk. Some of you will be in heaven with Jesus, but hopefully not. Hopefully you're kicking it. But 30 years from now, that's like the question, like, what do I want people to say at this birthday? 30 years from now, Like I'm 47, so 77 years old at that birthday. Well, I've got a lot of choices and habits that need to start this year in order for that year 30 to be what I dream of it being. Okay, so those are some pictures of just, and you might have a list of questions that you ask yourself. Those are some of the questions I ask myself personally. And then I start to turn toward organization. I get to lead our church, and so I start to ask myself some questions around vision. And so if vision leaks, it is so important. Listen, if you are a leader, you cannot say the vision enough. Just when you think, oh, they must have this, they must understand this, you're like, I have said this so many times, I bet they could say it in their sleep. No, because vision leaks. And you have to keep saying it over and over again in different and more creative ways that are portable for people. So then you have to come back to, all right, I'm going into a brand new year. What does it look like for me to be a vision carrier for my organization? And just simple questions. If you've never thought about this before, this is a framework that I've carried around forever. Where are we going? In the most simple terms, if I manage 3 people or 300 people, hey, where are we going? Why are we going there? Everybody wants to know, why are we doing it this? Why are we going there? It's so important. Maybe the most important question for people. Okay, I get we're going. Why are we doing that? If you're a leader, before you're in your current leadership role, you are looking up at other leaders going, now, why are we doing like this? So our people are doing the exact same thing. How are we going to get there? The how question. What can you do? You as a leader, but also, hey, for every person on your team, where do you fit in this? What does your role look like in the why? And what are the rewards? What is it going to look like? Paint the picture of when we get there, that's what it's going to look like. Man, won't it be amazing when we see, and you fill in the blank. All right, on the next group of questions, I think these are really, really important too, as you just keep drilling down into what it looks like to lead people. These are some just practical questions. They're not really in any order. But who needs to be sitting at the table that's not sitting here right now? There may be somebody that you need to hire. There may be somebody who's serving on another team that needs to come and sit at this table and help us think through this process. As we look at our organizational chart, we look at, hey, who could be here adding input to that? This is a great question we ask ourselves around here a lot. Where are we manufacturing energy? And what I mean by that is, hey, this product line was great 3 years ago, and we're trying to sell it, and we're excited about it, but we wouldn't buy it ourselves. Like we don't believe that this could work anymore, or hey, we're supposed to sell it, but it just doesn't make any sense how we're doing this. A system that we implemented 2 or 3 years ago that just no longer works after COVID, Is there anything I'm promoting I really don't like? I've said that. And then this is a great question for you. Where am I contributing the greatest to our organization? Like what's the biggest role that I have? Like what's the most important thing that I do? That if I stop doing it, like, man, we would really be in trouble. But most of the time we have 40 things that we're focused on instead of doing what only I can do. Like focusing in on the things that really matter. We all know the 80-20 rule, like that, like 20% of what I do results in 80% of the production of my life. And so how do I drill down on those things and focus more on them in this next year? Who's not keeping up on my team? And when I look around, the first thing I ever ask myself is, what have I not done to equip them or prepare them or train them? Who's not keeping up and why? This is a great question. These next two I continually go back to. If a great leader came into your role, what would be the first thing they change? What would a great leader do? Because odds are you already know that. It's just, do I have enough courage to make that change? But if a new leader came in and didn't have all the relational connections but you don't know Sarah's been with us a long time, and Sarah doesn't do anything anymore, but we all love Sarah. And if there's a Sarah in here, I'm very sorry, but Or, hey, we should have shut that product line down. We should have ended that partnership. We know that there's a courageous moment of something to do. And if a new leader came in without that baggage, they would just make the decision. Well, just pretend you're the new leader, because on January 1, you are. So walk in and be courageous. What are other great leaders doing that I need to adopt? And then just to end with, for me, I really like to pray and come up with a word or focus for the year. To say, I want my life to matter, and I want to focus in on one thing this year. I want to give myself to, and it might be something for you financially, it might be something with your family, it might be something that you want to accomplish together. In my world, entering into 2022, I knew that our church had run out of room, and so we need to expand. We need to build more facility. I also know that that's going to cost millions of dollars in order to do that. We've been dreaming about what it would look like to start other locations of our church, because we know that we're restricted on how much we can build on this piece of property based on county regulations. And so we knew even if we build the biggest building we can, we're gonna need to keep expanding and growing as a church. And so there was a lot of behind the scenes, but if you look in the vision question, it's like, hey, where are we going? And why are we doing that? Now, how are we gonna get that done? And so as I entered into 2022, the word for last year was just growth. How do we grow together into this? And so there was a lot of behind the scenes steps, but it's constantly bringing together your team, because you're trying to do all the day-to-day stuff, right? And then you're trying to move the ball down the field. And so I'll go back to where I started. If you want to grow your organization, you have to grow your people. If you want to grow your people, you have to grow yourself. And if you want to grow yourself, you have to carve out time to think. For some of us, that's a really, really easy thing to do. But for some of us, it's a discipline. We were just with, Jeremy and I were with some young leaders on Saturday. And I have a group of guys that I meet once a month with together. And some of them are in the first stages of career. And they look around, this was a funny exchange. They look around, and sometimes their boss isn't in the office, and in their mind, they're thinking, oh, he doesn't work as hard as me. Or he's not, we're here until 5 or 6, but what we gently tried to explain, this is good news for everybody, and if you're a younger leader, this helps you, is that when you're in a leadership role, it's not about the time or the hours, it's about the pressure and the weight. And so you have to, if you're gonna move your organization from here to here, you have to carve out time to think, to process, to go, okay, how do we get from here to here? And that is really difficult work. So I just encourage you. I like this exercise, but I encourage you at the end of this year, take a couple of days, grab a notebook, grab this series of questions, Google more questions, and just begin to think about, what does next year look like? And then some of you, you're gonna geek out. You're gonna be goal-setting nerds, and you're gonna get your spreadsheets out and how much percentage we are to those or that. I love that. But if nothing else, if you roll into next year going, I believe I'm supposed to head in this direction, it will rally your team around, let's go there. But you can't do that if you don't answer those questions for yourself. So carve out that time to think, reflect, and get ready for what I believe God wants for you next year, to help you move into a new season of life, because it matters to you, and it matters to your family, and it matters to the people that are counting on you. Okay, great. Jamie, thanks.
Okay, well, we're going to take some time here to go through a few questions. And if you haven't texted in a question, you can feel free to do that. There's another stool right over there.
Oh, it's over here.
I've got several questions already here, so thank you all for participating. And if you go to church here, now's the time to ask your pastor the toughest question you can ever think of. Okay, well, I saw some great questions here. Scotty, thanks so much for sharing. And I get to witness this firsthand, day to day with you very often. One of the questions that came out was, what was one or two of the biggest leadership jumps that you took along in your career? What were those moments that helped propel you to that next level of leadership?
I think the first was realizing how limited I was as a leader, and that there are a couple of things that I do well, and that most of what I'm asked to do, I don't do well. And so what is leadership is asking people to help you, and getting over that pride and getting over that moment of admitting out loud, I'm not good at this, would you please help me? To which, when you admit it, everybody around you already knows it. You're not admitting it. You're not like, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised you're not good at that. Like, they just were like, well, finally you realized it. And then they love it. And so I think that drilling in on doing as much as you can, like, what do I bring to the organization that matters the most? And so that was one of the big leadership jumps for me.
Great. So you were talking about vision and carrying the vision. One of the questions that came in is that the leaders in this person's current organization aren't communicating the vision very well, and they're not championing the vision. First of all, do most organizations, do they struggle with this? And then do you recommend that me attempting an upstream change and finding a different organization? How would you encourage that person to move forward in
Does that person work
situation?
here?
They do not, thankfully. I didn't recognize.
Because I would recommend that they go find a new, I'm just, man, raise your hand if this has ever been a situation you have been in. Yes, every single one of us have been in a moment, an organization where we looked up and we're like, why is there such a disconnect? A disconnect between what we're doing here. And I think there's a way to do it in a really respectful way, to sit down and say, hey, where are we going? What is it that you dream of and want to accomplish? Because I'm here to help that happen. I think there's a way to do that. Sometimes we've all been in corporate maybe situations where they went off and they did an offsite and they came back with a poster. It's got 49 objectives we're supposed to accomplish, and there's a binder for it. And you're like, there's no way this is ever gonna happen. And then we just put it on the shelf and they leave it. But I think going into your direct supervisor, or even having coffee or with someone in a higher stage of leadership and going, hey, what if you were me in my position, what do you need me to do? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? I think there's a respectful way to do that. And then ultimately, every person has to come to the place where, after a season of time, to go, okay, do I fit here? And is this where I want to stay involved? And so I hope that answers the question. So
one of the mantras we have tried to carry here and continue to preach and cast vision for is that we pass negativity up and positivity down. Like if we have complaints, we don't complain down to people who can't change it. We actually go to the people that have the ability to change it, and that is your direct report. That is maybe having the tough conversation. And I love how there is a gentle way, there's an appropriate way to do that. Another question that came through is, how can you tell personally that you're growing as a leader?
That's a very difficult place, right? Because growing as a leader is like growing as an acorn. Like, it just takes so much time. And I don't know about you, how many of you feel like, hey, I'm doing well, and then life smacks you in the face. You're like, I'm not doing well. I thought I was 3 steps ahead, and now I think that over time, when you start to hear people that you're leading say the things back to you that you really care about, not just they're mimicking that or they're not, but especially when you hear them say that to another person, a customer or somebody else, that they're communicating what's in your heart to somebody else. You go, oh. And that happens a lot around here when I'll see someone represent the vision of who we want to be to someone else, care for somebody, be there for somebody at the right moment to handle a situation. I go, oh, yeah. They might not have ever even heard me say that, but now that it's beginning to leak into the organization as the DNA, I think that's when I feel like I'm growing as a leader. And the second one is just leadership is habitual. It's not a one-time thing. It's over and over and over and over again. And so I think committing yourself to the small things, and when you see those things start to stack up, then yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And I get like I said, I get the benefit of being close enough to you to see you carry out the way you live your life, and you answer these questions. You're teaching things that you do on a regular basis, and you've even shared examples of journal entries that you've written down, and you talk about the power of consistency and those things. So thank you for modeling that. I think that's always better than the people that can just get up and teach it. As relates to the previous question we asked was, I believe this question came in, what role does feedback or hearing from others on how they experience you play a role in your leadership growth?
I think it's huge. As one of my mentors says, like if you don't listen to feedback, eventually you'll be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. They're just yes men and yes women. And so I think listening to feedback, we try to create a feedback culture here, and everyone should in every environment. And I think that starts at the top with you as a leader to say, hey, and to, for instance, in my world, that's all I can translate it to. After every service, I probably find 5 people and go, hey, how was that? What would you change? Like, was there anything that we missed there? Like, it's opening the door, and we have teams of people that go, hey, I think we should do this or say this. When you said this, that was confusing. Like, when you model that, it invites people. And then you have to listen to it and be willing to shift and change your perspective. Also, this is important for young leaders. Sometimes people will give you feedback that isn't right. And you lovingly have to give perspective back. Hey, I understand how you see that, but there are 25 factors that you haven't considered and why I did that. And I'm not saying you have to say all of them. I'm just saying that sometimes I made a decision on purpose that you disagree with, but there's a reason why. And there's information that person doesn't have. And I also have critics. There's a difference between, anybody else have critics? So feedback and critics. You know, feedback is, I love you, I want to help you. I see something, I love what we're doing here. Okay. Critics are just people who are, they nitpick and they're trying to tear you down. And I just try not to receive criticism from somebody I wouldn't trade lives with, to go, that's funny. Oh, I like that. I like my life better than yours.
Just as you were talking, I wanted to maybe ask a little bit deeper, have you go a little deeper on that, because you've talked about times in your younger career where you had to step out and make a decision that you got feedback on that you didn't felt set right. You didn't think it was accurate, and you had to go against the feedback. I would also just preface with saying you're one of the best at being able to receive feedback, and you model that. But how did you measure that in those moments where you were taking feedback or you were getting thoughts around what decision to make, but you had to make a different decision? Mm-hmm. What played a factor in that for you? Does that make sense?
It makes total. I'm just thinking about my response.
Yeah.
So when you're a young leader with less experience, you're getting feedback from all different angles, right? And I've had this conversation with young leaders on our team. I was like, well, who's right? Because they're all saying different things. And as you grow as a leader, then you also have to have values, and you have to have like guts and courage and go, I've been around the block a little bit. Like I hear that, but then every person who's a leader, ultimately you have responsibility, right? I mean, whether it's your family or if it's a small group that you're leading at the office or an entire corporation or Fortune 500 company, there comes moments when you have to make a call. Like I've collected all of that and I go, okay, out of all my wisdom and experience and feedback, this is what we're supposed to do. And you lean in. And I'm a decisive person, and you probably are too if you're a leader. And here's what I just think is that most of the time you can make a decision, and then if it's wrong, you just alter course and make another decision. And sometimes people that we work with don't see it that way. Like this is the only decision. And if we mess this up, we've blown up the whole thing. No, we might just learn from that and then alter. And I don't even know if that's answering your question, Jamie, but that's like it's collecting all of that. And if you're a church person, there is one of my favorite verses in the book of Acts. The leaders of the church are trying to make a decision, and they pray about it, they talk about it, they argue about it, and then they say this phrase, well, it seems good to us and the Holy Spirit, which to me, I translate, well, we're about 80% sure, and so we're just going. I have never been more than 80% sure about any decision in my life. Like, I thought you had to get to 100, but sometimes you have to just go, yeah, we're going that way. And then I have to own it, right? You have to own it. If you make the decision and it goes, it's on me, so.
Yeah, I think that answers the question really well, because what I think was in my mind was that time when younger leaders are maybe expressing to some older leaders in the room, and there's some new things that older leaders can learn from younger leaders. And so not to be closed-minded, but as a younger leader, sometimes you have to make a tough decision. But like you said, you got to own it. So speaking about younger and older leaders, what's something a question that came in, what's something that you would tell your younger self now in perspective of where you're sitting?
Man, I bet you guys got some good answers for that, don't you? Like I took myself way too seriously. I still do. I put so much pressure on myself to make everything happen and make everything perfect. And I just think life is too hard to live that way. It's like it's a weight and a stress and a pressure that can be overwhelming if you're the leader. And to say to myself, hey, I'm going to work as hard as I can, and I'm going to go home and take a nap. I'm going to leave the rest up to God. I'm going to give everything I have, but then, hey, I'm going to enjoy my life. And I would just say that to, and especially young leaders, I think so much of, especially if you're 20s, if you're in your 20s or early 30s in this room, this decade is about who you're becoming. It's not so much about what you're doing. There are people who are in all different fields in this room, and but it's about the leader, the person you're becoming in that season, more than what you're actually doing, whether I'm in this field or this line of work or what my title is, because all of that's coming. And if you become the right person, God will put you in platforms and positions to be used.
Another question. We actually still have a couple minutes, so if you actually had another question come to mind, feel free to text it in. I've got a few questions left here. One of them is, when you build a team of leaders, what are the non-negotiables you look for in those team members?
Character is the first one. You don't correct a liar, you fire a liar. Like, yeah, character is huge. Like, can I trust you? Chemistry is incredibly important. I have just made it my mission to not hire people in my circle that I wouldn't want to spend my day off with. I want to like people. So I want to build a team of people that we enjoy being together. And then your competency. And that probably is the bottom one. Like, is your character high? You know, and are you a person who's teachable? And hey, do we enjoy working together? Is there a chemistry and connection? I've hired people on our team that are like, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know we're going to do it together. So let's figure that out. And it's it helps because they had tremendous character and we connected. And I know this isn't the same in every organization because you go, well, this is the pool I got to work with, and there's not a lot to work with. But pulling those people together to go, hey, do we connect? And then the last one would be competent. I think you can train competency if people have the right heart.
And I just actually was sharing that the other day with my brother because we got a lot of time in the car recently. But you, one of the things I learned from Scotty was the interview process, very similar, even probably go a little bit deeper in the interview process, but then this dinner at the end, right, where can we hang out, have dinner together, talk, can our wives and our families, do we like each other? Mm-hmm. And something that Scotty said to me early on when I first came on staff here was, we want to build a church that we ourselves and our families want to be a part of, would love to attend. And that is something very practical, but it's something that I think makes Journey what it is. Another question here. Oh no, I asked you that one. I'm sorry. How can I best schedule my life as a leader? And I'm assuming maybe just practically scheduling, but how do I best schedule my life as a leader?
Man, that's a broad question, right? For everybody who's in different worlds, but...
comes from your son, if that helps.
Okay, good. Well, we had this meeting last week, so you didn't listen.
I think he was just setting you up to have that
it's
conversation.
It's a great question. Yeah. For every person, maybe you've done this before, no matter what stage of life or position you're in, creating an ideal week is incredibly important. Now, that no one ever has an ideal week, but to look at your week and begin to block out key pieces of that week. Now, for me, like I'm an early morning guy, but I want to spend some time around the things that are helping me grow as a person and as a leader. So for me, that's reading scripture and prayer. For you, it might be reading. I'm in the middle of reading a business leadership book or a book that stretches me and grows me. And so I try to do that early in the morning before the day starts so that doesn't get interrupted by the task list. And then I also am going to schedule in time for my marriage and for my kids. And I'm going to put those big rocks into my ideal week and into our calendar. And so I have adult children now, college and married, but just every one of us has demands on our life that will never end. And there is always more to do. And nobody goes home at the end of the day and goes, yep, did it all today. Like every leader has more to do. But disciplining ourselves to say no and to go home and to spend time. You've all probably heard, like, hey, dating your spouse is so incredibly important. Family experiences, one-on-one time with your kids, time away with your spouse, away from your kids. Like sometimes that's incredibly challenging, but it is so important. My wife and I are empty nesters. We still like each other. Like a lot of people love each other when their kids leave. They just don't like each other anymore. So that's important, like carving that time out. I have a good relationship with my adult kids. So I don't know what your industry or what your day-to-day tasks look like, but I can promise you this: if you build your schedule with those big rocks in, the other stuff just seems to find its place. And to say I have limits and to say no to those things. And a lot of times if you're in a leadership position, you do, and you get to model that for the people around you. So,
great. I got 2 questions left for you.
Okay.
One is, they came in as, what is something new that you are currently learning?
I've talked about it a lot today, but I'm working a lot on limits. And say, especially when you're a young leader, a young man for sure, like I have no limits. I could do whatever, whenever, as much as I want. And then just how limited I am as a person and as a leader, and then leaving that gap for other leaders and for God to do His work. And so that's the biggest thing that I'm carrying around right now. And then adding more and more team members and how to keep a DNA and a culture as a church grows, as an organization grows, where people go, it's enlarging, but it's keeping its personality. So,
Last question, and I think it'll be helpful for the audience too, is where are places that you are learning? What are resources that maybe books, podcasts, things that you're learning, and how you could share those with the folks in the audience?
Every leader should be a reader, and every leader should be a sponge, soaking things up. I try to read somewhere between 30 and 50 books a year because I love to read. But one of my favorite authors right now is Ryan Holiday. If you haven't read Ryan Holiday, he writes a lot on Stoic philosophy. So obstacle is the way, ego is the enemy. Just read a book by him called Discipline is Destiny. Love that. Our men's group right now is reading a book called Next Generation Leader by Andy Stanley. And then I've got a list of podcasts. We can send all those out maybe to our email.
Absolutely.
So Podcast Junkie. So I would love it if we had like a place where people could recommend their favorite podcast.
That'd be great.
Or favorite book they're
that,
reading right now. So,
well, can you guys give Scotty a big round of applause? Thank you so much, man, for being here with us.